You're watching Studio One from the University of North Dakota in Grand Forks.
Far north in the Arctic Quebecois region of Nunavik, you will find people living much differently than most are used to. Inuit people there still largely live off the land. Technology like the internet has only recently come to the people. Communication Associate Professor Tim Pasch studies languages and this Arctic culture. Well, thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thank you, Lacey.
All right, so how did you first get interested in the people of the Inuit?
Well, it's a language issue, so I have always enjoyed languages very much. So I speak French and Japanese, and I had the opportunity to study the Inuktitut language.
Okay, so your focus is language. How hard is it to learn this language of the Inuit?
It was quite complicated, to be honest. Yeah. I'd say more difficult than Japanese. It's like building an igloo. The words are very long.
So how did you try to learn the language?
It was a chance for me to study the language online. So I studied it on Skype. Using video feeds with my Arctic Inuit instructors and with a man named Mick Mallon, who's an expert in the field.
Okay, so do many people speak this language?
It was the first grant of its kind, actually, for First Nations language, so it was a great honor for me to be able to study.
All right, so you lived with an Inuit family in the Canadian Arctic,
yes.
In North Quebec. How would you describe the culture of the Inuit?
I think the Inuit people are fantastic. They are just wonderful, resilient, strong, and very humorous too. The Inuit have wonderful senses of humor, and they were very welcoming to me as well.
Okay, great people. And we actually just saw a map of where the region is, and it looked almost like there were roads and it was a town. How developed is this place that you've lived at?
While I was in the town of Inukjuak, I felt that it was quite developed for the area, but to get there is another story. It's impossible to drive up there, so we took airplanes and had multiple stops on the way up. It was a really challenging trip, and I was exhausted when I arrived. That's when they gave me a special seal blubber oil to kind of revitalize me.
Oh, wow. So you lived in a house with them up
Yes.
there?
So I lived in their home with them, and then they asked me to go on a hunting expedition.
Okay. Yeah, because it looks like there is not a lot of buildings and stuff like that. What kind of things you mentioned hunting. What other things did you go on?
We were able to go on boats together, and we built tents each evening, and it was a fishing expedition, and the real goal was for caribou, to find caribou.
Okay, so what other kinds of food did you guys hunt for besides the caribou?
You know, the food is so expensive up there, Lacey, to buy, that it's really in the interests of the family to find as much food as possible. So we caught Arctic char, which is a kind of really delicious salmon.
We actually have a picture of it, yeah.
It was wonderful, and that was eaten raw, actually. Kind of like a Japanese sushi in a way.
Okay, so were there problems finding this kind of...
The fish came relatively easy after the first few days, once we got away from the community. But in the beginning, they didn't bring much food with them, and so we were eating sea urchin, if you're familiar with that. So that was an experience.
All right. So how do you focus your research when you were up there? What did you most focus on when you were there?
I had my laptop with me, and there were generators in the tents at night, and we were all charging our technology. So it's a real contrast between what you would think of as being, a hunting culture with this new technology. The internet's new too, and I'm interested in how the internet is affecting the language. So are young people losing their language, or are they able to continue using it online?
So you're saying the technology has influenced them to almost steer away from their language, or is it becoming more broad?
I think what's happening is that young people using social networking, a lot like how we use Facebook, MySpace, they use a different one up there. But what I'm noticing is that so much of it's in English that it's hard for them to use their own language online. So many elders or grandparents and parents are very concerned that their children will lose their culture in a few generations.
Okay, can you explain the language a little bit? How come it's so difficult? Do they have to do some kind of transcribing? I don't know.
Sure, and the language itself, they don't use letters like we do, like ABCs, for example. They use a special kind of script called syllabics. They look like geometric shapes almost, and for young people it's really challenging to type those in the computer with key commands, etc. And so they're just defaulting to English because it's easier. So what we were looking at is kind of pop-ups on the screen that will enable young people to be able to use their own language without having to worry about all these difficult key commands.
Okay, well, let's go a little bit back to the hunting that you talked about a little bit. You said that it was kind of difficult and it was hard to make sure that you found food, and it was expensive, so you had to hunt.
Yes.
So how come it was so scarce? How come there was problems finding food?
That's such a wonderful question, Lacey. The Inuit, are really feeling that global warming is causing a great deal of problem in the north. And so many animals are moving further and further away from the communities, further and further north. So the hunting grounds that have been available for generations are now no longer, the home of these animals. So it's becoming harder.
So are they hunting different kinds of food then in that case, or are they getting food from another area?
Mm-hmm. A lot of young people are buying more from the co-op. Not eating the traditional foods, and so that's another concern. The Inuit are sometimes called the canary in the coal mine of global warming. They're really feeling the impact.
Okay, so what do you expect for the future of the Inuit people?
Well, I'm very positive. I feel very confident, but I do think that the Inuit and many First Nations groups need to optimize the internet for their own communicative resources. So if they're able to harness the internet for their own communities, that'll be to their benefit.
All right, sounds great. Sounds like an amazing culture, and it was a great time for you to go up there.
Thank you so much.
All right, thanks.
Thank you.